Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into the crowded streets and smoky alleys of medieval Europe, where baths were rare, toothbrushes unheard of, and smells could overwhelm even the strongest nose. Forget today's fragrant soaps and running water. The real story is about river dips, scented herbs, and doing the best you could with a bucket of cold water. So tonight we ask, what it really took to keep yourself clean and what happened when you couldn't. What did it feel like to go weeks without a proper bath, relying on vinegar rinses and stale linen? Every region had its own customs, so let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see who's joining this journey into medieval hearths and privies. Now dim the lights, pull your blanket close, and let's step into the ale-soaked streets together. Before dawn, peasants gathered at the riverbank, wading into cool water that slipped between their toes. River washing served as the most common method of bathing for most medieval folk, especially those who lived near streams or slow-moving rivers. In summer months, entire families walked down dirt paths to a shallow bend where water pooled around smooth stones. Men and women removed rough woolen tunics, their children giggling as they splashed about to clear sleep from their eyes. The water's current carried away soot and sweat clinging to skin after a long night's work. Bathers used bundles of fresh twigs dipped in water to scrub dirt from hard-to-reach places. The twigs also carried the scent of living green wood that masked river smells and reminded them of forests beyond farmland. After washing, they stood on sandy shallows and wrung out coarse cloths before putting them back on. The cool river breeze dried charred patches of skin burned by fire pits and clay ovens. Bathing in a river required courage to brave winding currents and the occasional startled fish scurrying away. Children learned to move cautiously over muddy stones, lest they slip and land in deep water. Despite the risks, river bathing remained essential to daily life, especially for peasants who could not afford private quarters with running water. Grain merchants, boatmen, and traveling minstrels all relied on free-flowing rivers to wash away grime carried from distant roads. In towns and villages that hosted bathhouses, communal bathing offered a rare luxury. Bathhouses often stood near city gates where water from aqueducts or diverted streams flowed into public basins. Stone or timber structures enclosed these basins to preserve privacy and block wind. Bathers entered through wooden doors etched with symbols indicating separate times or rooms for men and women. Within the bathhouse, a steward or bath attendant stoked a fire beneath a large cauldron of water. As the wood logs crackled, water heated until steam rose from the tub's surface. Bathers paid a small fee in copper coins, or bartered a chicken or basket of eggs for access. A bath attendant guided each newcomer to a wooden bench where they undressed and handed garments to an assistant for safekeeping. Bathers then descended shallow steps into the steaming bath. The warm water soothed sore muscles stiffened from ploughing or weaving. Men relaxed first, using willow twigs like a brush to scrub grime from their backs. Women entered later, carrying small baskets of perfumed herbs to toss onto the water's surface. Lavender, mint, and rose petals floated among ripples, lending the bath an aromatic charm. Children sometimes peeked through narrow slits in the walls, entranced by laughter echoing inside. After soaking, bathers moved to wash basins where pails of cool water sat beside metal basins. They poured water with wooden ladles over themselves to rinse away suds. Finally, coatless and without cover, they wrapped themselves in linen sheets and moved to dressing benches. A bath attendant handed back freshly laundered garments for the wealthier citizens or guided poorer folk to loaner tunics washed and mended by the bathhouse staff. Wooden tubs offered another way to bathe when rivers or bathhouses lay out of reach. These tubs were crafted from oak or pine, bound by iron hoops. A single tub measured approximately 4 foot across and 2 foot deep. It held enough water to cover a seated adult. In gentry households, servants kept the tub in a private chamber, warmed by a nearby hearth. The tub filled from large cauldrons of heated water carried by hand from the kitchen. A servant used a long wooden ladle to dip water from cauldrons into the tub until the liquid reached chest height. The bather entered slowly, letting warmth seep into brittle limbs. For peasants, owning a tub and stoveable cauldron represented a rare privilege. Instead, they fashioned makeshift tubs of supple cowhide, stretched over bent saplings and stitched together with rawhide. These collapsible tubs held water heated over an open fire. Bathers sat as frogs sat in muddy pools, submerged to their armpits with wooden buckets at hand to pour water over their heads. After scrubbing with clumps of oats or handfuls of sand to remove persistent dirt, they hopped out, water sloshing around the tub's rim. The used water drained onto fertile ground where herbs would flourish, creating small garden plots behind farmhouses. Seasonal festivals provided public bathing opportunities as well. On holidays such as Easter or midsummer, villagers gathered at natural springs where water bubbled up from the earth. These springs carried legends of healing and protection. Bathing in a holy spring offered both spiritual cleansing and physical relief. People brought tokens to hang from low branches. Knives for skill in smithing or needlework, keys for good fortune, and strips of cloth to ward off misfortune. Bathers submerged themselves 3 times, kneeling in ice-cold water until numb. In spring, the cold sting of the water awakened senses dulled by winter frost. In midsummer warmth, the water's chill became welcome relief for laborers who finished haymaking at dawn. Priests often stood nearby to sprinkle holy water and chant prayers for safe passage through the year to come. Even when peasants could not bathe fully, they practiced partial washing. Women and children carried bowls of warm water from rivulets to wash hands and faces before prayer times. Wiping faces with damp cloths and rubbing vinegar into hair roots prevented lice. Vinegar also served as a makeshift deodorant. People spritzed necklines and wrists to mask sour scents. Men rubbed sand into soles of bare feet before planting seeds to strengthen skin and remove grime. When an ox dung patch soiled boots, farmers soaked their feet in pails of water mixed with fresh soapwort leaves. The natural saponin in the leaves created light foam that lifted dirt from skin. Afterward, they wiped feet with straw mats to dry, and then donned leather sandals thick enough to keep out sharp pebbles. In monastic orders, water held sacred significance. Monks bathed weekly in cold, flowing water, believing that discipline of the body fostered spiritual resilience. Nuns dipped fingers in blessed water at dawn to bless their own reflections in stone troughs. Before communal prayer, monks washed faces and forearms in stone basins filled at a spring within the monastery courtyard. While common folk might bathe only seasonally, religious communities bathed regularly, using wood-fired boilers to heat water during winter. They poured water into tubs in modest bathing chambers, bathing in shifts from oldest to youngest. Silence reigned in these chambers. Each monk bathed alone, praying for sins as skin tingled from cold or scalding heat depending on season. Despite all efforts, risk of disease loomed where water remained stagnant. Villagers avoided bathing in slow pools that bred mosquitoes or in town wells used by livestock, while water carried its own risks. Without filtration, people drank and washed in water polluted by upstream leaching. Yet necessity outweighed caution, and people risked illness to cleanse. When cholera or dysentery struck, physicians recommended avoiding baths entirely until the plague passed. By nightfall, families returned to homes with clean faces and refreshed spirits. Children raced to beds, hair still damp, hearing elders speak of preachers who warned against excessive bathing as a temptation of the flesh. Yet even those admonitions could not dampen gratitude for river dips or tub soaks. Across countryside, from humble mud cottages to grand stone halls, bathing formed a patchwork of rituals, each unique to region and resources. Despite hardships and limited means, medieval folk found fleeting moments of warmth and cleanliness at river bends, in public baths, and within timber tubs. For a few precious hours, They lay aside grime and toil, feeling, for a while, that they lived unburdened by mud and sweat. By mid-morning, the stewards at the village bathhouse rang a small metal bell to summon the first arrivals. Men entered from one side and women from another, the wooden partitions muffling the splashes within. Each bather carried a small bundle of soapwort sprigs or sweet-smelling herbs to infuse the water. Those who could afford it paid a small fee in copper coins, while poorer folk offered eggs or a chicken in exchange. Bath attendants worked behind the scenes, stoking the fire beneath a large iron cauldron filled with water drawn from a cool spring. As the heat rose and steam curled toward the low ceiling, attendants ladled hot water into wooden tubs for each bather. Surrounded by the sounds of crackling logs and rushing water, bathers disrobed behind coarse linen curtains. They placed garments on wooden pegs lining the walls, then stepped into the warming tub. The water soothed aching muscles and cleansed layers of dirt and sweat from body and hair. A long wooden comb fashioned from antler served to scrape scales of mud from scalp and nape. When the water cooled, attendants poured fresh hot water from buckets as needed. While bathing, patrons exchanged news of harvest yields and recent fairs. Travelers described roads crowded with merchant carts and goods from distant towns. Children peered through cracks in the boards, watching elders relax in the healing embrace of warm water. Though the bathhouse offered only simple benches and rough planks, for a brief interval it felt like a sanctuary removed from the demands of toil. A slender beam of daylight shone through a small window high on the wall, illuminating swirling steam where wisps of lavender leaves floated. Women clustered near a smaller tub set aside for infants and young children. Midwives once recommended cold river dips for newborns as a strengthener, but in general, warm water proved gentler on fragile bodies. Mothers sang lullabies while gently washing babies with cloths dampened in soapy water. They rubbed babies' cheeks with soft linen and swaddled infants in clean garments lent by the bathhouse. In this shared space, women discussed remedies for common ailments. Some swore by rubbing oak galls on chafed skin, while others preferred a pinch of frankincense in simmering water to cure rashes. Twice each month, the rector visited the bathhouse. He reminded the faithful of sermons decrying vain obsession with messy luxury, but acknowledged that clean bodies reflected clean souls. In his simple robe, he waded into the steam briefly to bless the water with holy words. Bathhouse patrons dipped cupped hands into a pool of blessed water and anointed foreheads. After the blessing, some lingered to catch a final touch of warmth before emerging into crisp air. The rector's visits offered a rare link between spiritual and physical well-being, a moment where soap and prayer mingled. In springtime, when temperatures rose, villagers flocked to riverbanks for bathing. Musicians played simple tunes on flutes and lutes, while families spread cloths on grassy banks. Women washed in shifts, tucking garments into bundles that floated nearby on small rafts made from bundled reeds. As they scrubbed hands, elbows, and feet with river sand, children splashed in the shallows, learning to navigate currents and identify smooth pebbles for throwing into deeper water. Men often stood thigh-deep in water, chatting about expected rains or the price of grain. Some carried small wooden paddles to stir the water and dislodge lingering bits of straw or leaves. On feast days such as St. John's Day, many villages held bathing rituals at midday. The entire community walked in procession toward a favored spring or river shallows. Elders carried a carved wooden chest containing scented oils and bundles of scented flowers. Children balanced on mothers' shoulders, curious to see what games and offerings would follow. At the water's edge, the priest blessed the spring with incense and chanted prayers. Then everyone dipped hands or feet into the cool flow, believing it would ward off disease and preserve youth. Those who ventured farther in the water emerged refreshed and spiritually renewed. A young couple seeking fertility joined hands beneath a weeping willow as cool water lapped at their knees. They believed that spiritual blessings mingled in the water would bless their union. Winter brought a different routine. Ice formed on shallow ponds and rivers, Bathhouses closed for lack of water to heat. Instead, people performed ritual face and hand washes with water carried from distant springs. On Saturday mornings, most families boiled water on hearth fires to create small wooden tubs for washing feet. Mothers filled basins with hot water and scrubbed children's bodies quickly before drying chattering lips with woolen cloths. Men dipped cloths in warm water and wiped dirty faces and necks before leaving for the fields where frost lay like silver dust on the earth. In monastic settings, monks and nuns bathed in private chambers warmed by small fires. They used stone basins set within recesses in thick walls. A simple valve allowed water from stone tanks above to trickle into the basin. Monks immersed feet, then splashed water over torso and face. Monastic rules restricted bathing to once a week for moderate monks or twice for those in infirmary care. Nuns copied similar habits in separate cloisters. In each case, bathwater mixed with blessed herbs such as rosemary and thyme, believed to keep leprosy and scabies at bay. Interestingly, in some towns, people reused bathwater to wash laundry. Women dragged tubs to garden plots, dumping warm, soapy water near the base of fruit trees and vines. The soap washed into soil like a nutrient-rich lotion, encouraging growth. When spring rains arrived, the fields bubbled with daffodil and primrose, testament to unorthodox reuse of bathwater. Despite frequent bathing in rivers or bathhouses, medieval folk remained mindful of superstitions surrounding bathing during illness. Many believed that a fevered patient should avoid cold water under penalty of worse sickness. If someone fell ill, the remedy involved steaming in a small hut of woven reeds and covering self with blankets rather than cold water immersion. Steam helped break fevers without shocking the body. Afterward, patients rubbed ointments of marigold and bay leaf on temples and wrists. Once calm returned, children fetched warm water in jugs and poured it over mothers' hands and feet, repeating the ritual until dull headache eased. As evening drew near, bathers returned from river or bathhouse. Cloths wrapped hair and damp garments carried chill. Families gathered around hearth fires to dry bodies as quickly as possible. They wore layered woolen tunics and wrapped shoulders with cloaks hand-woven by village weavers. Fathers tucked children into straw beds warmed by hot water bottles made from hollowed gourds. Mothers smoothed hair with combs carved from elk antler and tied it back to prevent tangle beneath coarse coverings. Despite daily washing, fleas and lice remained unwelcome guests. Families boiled combs and linens to remove pests. They sprinkled mixtures of dried lavender and rue in linen chests, hoping the bitter aroma would repel bugs. When spring fled, winter's grip and summer neared, bathing shifted back to more open rituals. The cycle of cold washes and warm steam reflected broader medieval values, balance between body and spirit, communal ties forged in shared labor and leisure, and respect for natural rhythms. Though modern conveniences eluded them, people found creative ways to keep clean. In each river dip and bathhouse session, they found moments of pleasure and respite from daily toil. The mingled sound of rushing water, crackling fires, and whispered prayers shaped a world where hygiene required both courage and community. In these ways, the medieval bath remained more than a chore. It became a ritual woven into the fabric of daily life. Before dawn, a thin mist clung to the village fields as villagers gathered by the old well. The well stood at the edge of the central courtyard, its stone walls hewn from local rock and smoothed by generations of hands. A pair of wooden posts rose on either side of the well mouth, supporting a heavy beam from which hung a sturdy rope. On that rope swung a woven bucket crafted from willow rods. No pump existed here. To draw water, one had to pull the rope by hand and allow the bucket to descend into cool darkness. Fetching water began with selecting a suitable receptacle. Most households possessed one sturdy bucket each, though wealthier families might own two. Some buckets were made from wood staves bound by iron hoops. Others were simple clay jugs carried inside a woven basket. As the first villager approached, two neighbors stepped aside. Respect dictated that more experienced fetchers have unblocked access to wells before sunrise. A young mother tied a strip of linen around her waist to secure her skirts and then gripped the rope with both hands. She leaned back and let the bucket descend into the well. She counted her pulls so that she would not release too much rope at once and risk losing the bucket in darkness. When the rope slackened, she waited a moment until she heard the faint gargle of water. Then she pulled evenly until the bucket broke the surface. Cold droplets clung to the wooden rim as she balanced the wet bucket on a ledge and tipped its contents into an earthenware pitcher. Once full, she raised the bucket again to collect more water for her family. Under normal circumstances, she made 2 trips per household. Each trip consumed precious time and energy, but water was life's necessity. During dry spells, the well stood nearly empty by mid-morning. Villagers formed a loose line at a stone trough near the well to collect fresh water as it trickled into shallow channels. Those in line measured out only enough water for cooking and minimal washing. Mothers carried small bowls to measure water for each task. After quenching thirsts, they used the remainder sparingly to prepare porridge or rinse cloth diapers. No one wasted a single drop. If water splashed onto the stone floor, they knelt and wiped it up with a strip of rag, returning every last bit to the pitcher. When the well began to run low in summer months, the village council sent a party of children and able-bodied men to fetch water from a distant stream. They set out at first light, carrying wooden yokes across their shoulders. 2 glazed earthenware jugs hung from each end of the yoke, swaying as they walked. Their path wound through fields dotted with barley and rye until they reached a small brook. The water there ran clear but shallow. They knelt at a wide bend where pebbles and clay formed a natural basin. Using small mugs carved from hollowed wood, they scooped water directly from the current. Each mugful they poured into larger jugs at the stream's bank. Once a jug filled, they replaced it in the sling on the yoke and balanced the weight before heading home. The journey back proved arduous. As the sun climbed higher, villagers loosened coarse linen tunics around their waists and wiped sweat from their brow. The heavy jugs tugged downward, stretching sinews and testing resolve. At each footfall, they braced for the slight shift of water that threatened to tip the weight. Arriving at the village well area, they carefully tilted each jug and poured its contents into a large stone cistern that fed community troughs. Children and older folk lined up to collect measured bowls of water for their families. In winter, when streams froze and wells clogged with ice, villagers relied on snow and ice for water. They chopped holes in frozen ponds using iron axes until a hole large enough for a 2-handed bucket emerged. Below the ice layer lay clear water. Cold water froze upon contact with skin, so bathers carried lengths of rope and wrapped cloth around the bucket handle to avoid frostbite. They drew water swiftly and poured it into a hollowed trench near the hearth. As the bucket contents warmed on hot stones, steam rose and melted ice freezes in the trough. Tap water remained scarce, so people melted snow in cauldrons over the hearth and ladled hot water into large wooden bowls. In some lean years, wells ran completely dry. During those periods, the Reeve ordered a temporary rationing decree. Each household received a ceramic mug for water drawn from a distant spring. A guard paced near the spring with a whistle. When a mug full of water crossed his line, he blew the whistle, and the next household stepped forward. None dared overstep or fetch more than allowed, lest they anger neighbors and incur fines in grain or labor. Those caught drawing extra water faced mandatory community service, such as repairing thatch on the bakehouse roof. Beyond practical tasks, well customs held ceremonial meaning. Every spring, villagers gathered at the well for a brief ritual. Elder women prepared bowls of scented herbs and cinnamon sticks bound with twine. They cast handfuls of herbs into the well's waters, chanting blessings for an abundant harvest and good health. After the herbs sank into murky depths, they blessed each bucket with a sprinkle of holy water. Priests then led a short prayer, reminding the faithful that water symbolized spiritual cleansing as well as physical necessity. Villagers, young and old, stepped forward to touch the well's rim and cross themselves. They believed that wells connected the community to unseen blessings beneath the earth. Cisterns offered another water source. Wealthier homes stored rainwater, collected from roof slopes in large stone basins. Clay pipes carried rain from wooden gutters into underground cisterns lined with plaster. To keep water clear, they drew off a few pails each morning, leaving behind sediments that settled to the bottom. Elderly women would then scoop clear water from the top layer to use for cooking or washing. Children knew to avoid washing clothes in cistern water since their soaping dirtied the supply for others. Instead, they washed laundry at the river or a public laundry area where scrubbing boards lined shallow basins fed by spring water. In summer's heat, villagers worked in shifts to refill the well. One group drew water each morning before fields grew hot. A second group rotated duties at midday, carrying buckets to troughs for livestock. The herd of goats and sheep awaited each delivery. Their lids and flock masters pressed snouts against each bucket until foam drifted into the air. The sheep bleated impatiently, urging humans to fetch more water. In that role, a child provided water to parched animals while neighbors carried water to village outdoor ovens. Bakers needed dregs of clean water to knead bread dough. Strange customs governed the first water drawn from a new well. When a well owner finished constructing its stone walls, a small group of neighbors gathered at a crossroads and held flint torches. They walked silent into the night to break a small hole at the bottom of the well's wall. A bucket plunged into the hole, drew forth a few drops of fresh water. Those drops they lifted to the moon, with a silent toast, and offered to each neighbor to drink. Drinking the first drops, as darkness whispered, was believed to bring blessings and guard against evil spirits that lurked by water. In early spring, villagers observed a custom called the rite of the salted bucket. Before drawing from a recently cleaned well, they placed a pinch of salt into the water. Salt symbolized purification and commanded bad omens to depart. Afterward, each house held small bowls of salted water on their thresholds for travelers to splash onto boots. They believed salted water at the entrance safeguarded home blessings within. As midday turned to afternoon, the well's rope frayed. Constant pulling of wet rope against wood wore the fibers thin. A neighbor skilled in rope making harvested flax fibers and twisted them into new rope. Using an improvised rope spinner formed from a wooden peg stuck into a stump, he twisted fiber until it held together under tension. Once the new rope replaced battered old pulls, villagers resumed drawing water. During drought years, elders recalled tales of earlier famines when wells dried and springs vanished. They explained that failing to maintain bridges and aqueducts upstream could choke water sources. Each generation learned to dig new shafts in search of aquifers a few feet deeper. These new wells cost labor and time as neighbors dug by hand with spades and picks. Each shovel full they set aside carefully so that the shaft walls remained strong and vertical. By evening, villagers visited small rivulets which had seeped from a hillside. They filled small jugs and carried them home. Some families brewed thin mead from the sweet water, mixing honey and water to create a drink that stretched supplies. Children sipped the drink at dusk before bed. During harvest festivals, any surplus mead they shared at communal feasts, blessing farmers for safe return to village. Through heat waves and blizzards alike, water scarcity shaped daily life. Fetching from wells demanded strategy, caring for buckets and ropes, balancing heavy loads, and paying tribute through salted water rites. When rivers or streams lay distant, carrying water preserved community bonds, while reinforcing respect for the precious resource. Each dawn and dusk villagers paused by the well, collecting life, sustaining liquid, and offering prayer for benevolence beneath the earth. In these customs, they forged kinship with water itself, relying on shared labor, ritual, and thrift to endure seasons of abundance and drought alike. Once the first troughs at the village well ran dry for the day, neighbors resolved to move water drawn from the distant spring into the central cistern. Under midday sun, a small procession formed, carrying stout wooden yokes balanced across shoulders. 2 clay jugs hung from each yoke, brimming with cold, clear water. The journey to the well travelled along a dusty lane that wound past barley fields and patches of grazing sheep. Each step required care, for the heavy jugs threatened to shift and splash precious liquid onto the parched ground. Women and children walked alongside men, each taking turns to steady the yoke and offer cold water to those labouring under the sun. Upon arrival, the water carriers approached the cistern, whose stone lip bore the scars of many seasons' service. Clay walls rose 2 hands high and formed a broad basin that held greater quantities of water than small well troughs. Neighbours dipped out water in wooden buckets and passed them to waiting families. Each household received a measure based on its needs and size. Pregnant women and nursing mothers took extra portions, as village custom ensured the most vulnerable had priority. Men who worked in the fields through the midday heat also received more water to quench deep thirst. A robed steward, appointed by the reeve, kept a tally of each household's share to prevent overindulgence. When water ran low in the cistern before the next trip arrived, the steward announced an urgent pilgrimage to the hillside well. A small group of able-bodied villagers volunteered. They tied spare rope to a strong oak post sunk into the well's rim. Then they lowered a sturdy wooden bucket into the cool darkness. Each rope pull cost effort and time. Some paused to wipe sweat from their foreheads and gaze across the fields as the bucket descended. When Fetcher felt the splash of water against the buckets inside, he signaled for help, and neighbours hauled it to the surface. Rainwater collection offered another means of easing scarcity. In wealthier homes, a system of wooden gutters channeled rain from thatched roofs into barrels placed beneath. Large oak barrels filled slowly during spring showers. When full, the barrels boasted many pitchers of water. Villagers used this rainwater for cooking and washing, yet as summer's sun pressed hot and skies remained cloudless, barrels emptied swiftly. Families transferred water from larger barrels to smaller jugs to sustain through drought days. Each morning and evening, children carried water jugs from barrels set in shaded corners of courtyards. They poured measured amounts into stone basins for washing, or into wooden bowls set upon hearths for cooking. Parents taught children to be careful with every splash, for a wasted drop threatened household supply before the next storm arrived. Rituals governed water rationing during severe shortages. At the first sign of parched fields and cracked earth, the reeve sounded a horn at dawn. The horn's call gathered villagers for a meeting near the old oak where the council assembled. Under the broad shade of ancient limbs, the reeve declared a period of water restriction. Each household must reduce usage by half. Washing clothes at the river held only on days when even the spring ran low. Bathing became once per week rather than twice. Cooks measured porridge with less water, simmering grains slowly to eke out savings. No morning wash, nor cleaning of utensils with fresh well water until the season of harvest. Immediately after the decree, villagers formed a long line at the well. Each family approached in turn. The steward filled a single wooden bucket for each household. Owners carried the bucket home and returned it empty. Only then did the steward fill it again for the next family. The ritual remained strict and public. Those caught sneaking extra water faced fines of grain or labor repairing village thatch, roofs, and fences. Even wanderers from neighboring hamlets respected the decree, for none wished to risk eviction or reproach under the weight of drought. During such times of scarcity, neighbors lent jugs to one another, ensuring that collective work at the fields continued. If a farmhand needed water to water sick livestock, neighbors brought fresh jugs from distant springs and shared generously. At midday, the sun stood high, and weary men sat beneath the shade of willow trees. They drank slowly from wooden cups, as women poured small sips of water to rinse grimy faces. Each face reflected gratitude, mixed with anxiety for what the day might bring. When villagers returned to arid fields, mothers remained behind to watch children and guard jugs filled from the cistern. Local bookstores remained closed during drought. Instead, manuscripts remained moist and ink threatened to fade as humidity dropped. On rare nights when clouds gathered overhead, villagers left pots of water on porch steps to collect dew. At dawn, they retrieved each pot and carefully poured dew water into jugs to supplement reserves. The practice linked them to the patterns of earth and sky, drawing relief from minute droplets that formed on leaves each dusk. As the drought dragged on, apprentices at the bakehouse worked with less water for kneading dough. The master baker taught them how to use yeast from previous loaves to leaven bread without fresh water. They pressed batter thick and tacky to conserve moisture. When loaves emerged from the oven dusty with flour, the townspeople broke bread slowly, savoring each crumb. Those accustomed to simple porridge now craved each slice, knowing the struggle that secured even that small portion. In fields beyond the village, farmers dug small furrows between rows of vegetables and herbs. Each furrow served as a capillary channel, allowing limited water to reach plant roots directly. They scoured for any sign of moisture and spooned precious water gently around newly planted seedlings. When rain finally arrived as a soft mist, men raised their eyes to the sky and shouted prayers to saints of rain. They gathered rainwater in wooden bowls and poured it into small wells dug among flax patches. When the rains returned, streams filled again, and color returned to brown fields. Villagers rushed to clean wells and cisterns. They dredged silt from the bottom of each trough, restoring flow. Children the next morning passed buckets brimming with cold water up to eager faces. Women and men washed dusty cloths in the revived streams. Bathing returned to twice per week. The parish priest held a Thanksgiving bell ringing at midday. Villagers carried bowls of water to central wells and offered small coins to water deities, expressing gratitude. After months of frugality, the water ran free once more, and the sense of relief danced in every droplet, yet memories of scarcity lingered. Elder women taught children to respect water as a gift not to be wasted. Harvest festivals included a ritual drawing of water from the well for cooking, blessing, and drinking. Each jug poured symbolized the cycle of seasons and the precarious balance between drought and abundance. In households, jars of rainwater sat atop larders even months later, ready to be used first for delicate tasks such as bathing infants or preparing medicinal teas. Officials stored written records of drought years. Each chronicle listed yields of crops against rainfall measures. They recorded times when flocks suffered from thirst and fields cracked in dusty heat. From these entries, future stewards learned when and how to dig new wells or deepen cisterns. Long after the drought passed, villagers endured shorter dry spells with less fear. They remembered that wells rested on aquifers hidden deep within the earth. They respected communal effort to haul water, and they understood that water scarcity touched every aspect of their lives from hygiene to healing. In a world without pumps or pipes, each bucket drawn from a well or stream-shaped fate, forging a bond between land and people as vital as the liquid itself. Before sunrise, you gather with neighbors around a stone hearth in the village smithy, where a large iron pot stands over glowing coals. Today you will make soap from rendered animal fat and lye made from wood ashes. The pot holds a mixture of melted fat that once dripped from slaughtered sheep and cattle. Farmers from fields nearby brought households fat trimmings tied in linen sacks. Each family's scraps combine in the pot until the fat softens into a golden liquid. Neighbors stir gently with a long wooden pole until no solid lumps remain. The melted fat smells warm and earthy, carrying memories of woolly flocks on grassy hillsides. While the fat melts, a small group of women and older children prepare lye water. They built a makeshift lye trough beneath a slanted roof of thatch so rain cannot dilute the liquid. The trough is a wooden barrel set over even stones. Within the barrel sits a straw basket filled with ashes from burnt oak and maple wood. Rainwater drips through gaps in the boards above, washing down through the ashes and collecting as lye in a clay bowl placed at the barrel's base. Each morning, the women check the clay bowl and ladle out clear but harsh water that burns the tongue. This lye carries alkaline power necessary to turn fat into soap. As the fat in the pot bubbles gently, you pour a handful of lye water through a cloth filter to remove charcoal bits. Then you add the lye water slowly to the pot while stirring constantly. Fat and lye combine with a hiss, and foam rises to the surface. You continue adding ladlefuls of lye until the mixture thickens into a soft paste. A few drops of fat still float on top when the mixture approaches a consistency like thick cream. At that point, you test for readiness by dropping a small bit onto a plate of water. If it holds its shape without sinking, it means saponification has occurred, and the soap will hold. Neighbors lean in to watch smoke drift from the pot, and to breathe the warm aroma of rendered fat and ash. A few children fetch wooden molds carved from clean oak. Each mold features simple leaf motifs to seat soaps in neat squares. You ladle the thick paste carefully into each mold, smoothing the surface with a small spatula. You tap the molds against a wooden bench to settle the mixture and release tiny air bubbles. When all molds are filled, you cover them with linen cloth and leave them to cool. Tomorrow you will cut each block into smaller bar-shaped pieces for use. Meanwhile, a handful of women stand at a trough built from rough sawn planks. They prepare scented water for nightly soaks. In a large cauldron perched over a fire, they heat water until it steams. Into the cauldron they drop rose petals picked fresh at dawn from a nearby garden tended by the abbess. Those petals wilt in the warm water and release a faint rosy perfume that drifts across the courtyard. The women stir petals with a wooden spoon until water turns a soft blush color. They strain out the petals through a woven cloth and pour the rose water into stone jars. A few jars they leave open to cool in the breeze, so that steam carries fragrance through the village. Another group of women trims the rinds from hard-skinned oranges shipped from southern lands. The peel sits in a shallow wooden box while they steep it in warm water drawn from a spring. As water softens, they remove bright orange peels and spread them on clean linen to dry in the sun. The water then turned a delicate citrus hue. They strain out bits of white pith and pour the scented water into wooden buckets. Soon this orange water will serve as a foaming bath for those who visited the bathhouse. Those who cannot pay the bathhouse fee dip small cloths into orange water and apply them to face and hands to mask sweat and dust. As morning wanes, you return to the soap molds. The cool dawn air has firmed the paste into pale green blocks. You press the sides of the mold, freeing each block with a gentle twist. Then you use a wooden knife to slice each block into 4 smaller squares. The fresh soap feels firm yet slightly pliable when warm to the touch. You set the squares on half logs, laid in the sun, spacing them so air can circulate. Over the coming weeks, each soap square will cure and harden, becoming a reliable cleanser. By midday, the courtyard fills with villagers carrying bundles of rowan and jasmine. They arrive at the bathhouse to prepare scented soaks for those who wish to bathe but lack time to visit the river. In a stone basin, they mix rose water and orange water, adding a handful of crushed mint leaves. The fragrant water shimmers in the sun. Women dip cloth strips into the scented mix and dampen foreheads and wrists of passers-by. The sweet mint aroma disguises less pleasant odors. Farmers heading to the fields wipe dusty faces and return home wearing the scent of orange and rose, feeling cleaner until they can bathe properly. At the riverbank, children gather to wash clothes in the flowing water. They build lye soapy suds by pouring soap squares into a rough carved trough. They stir water with branches until it foams white. Laundry tumblers beat clothes against smooth stones. Soap suds swirl into river currents that carry dirt downstream. The washed cloths drape over low bushes to dry in the sun and wind. Mothers supervise from nearby, sifting soap bars through baskets of cloth until only thick clumps of lye and dirt remain. When evening nears, villagers gather at the bathhouse. Men remove garments and step into brimming wooden tubs of scented water. They soak and scrub with soap squares, paying close attention to hands, elbows, and feet where grime accumulates. The bathhouse floor becomes slick with soapy water. An attendant holds a bowl of rose water mixed with vinegar to rinse faces and chests. Women then enter, carrying baskets of fresh herbs and small bowls of honey for skin treatment. They pour warm water over silken cloths and rub scented honey onto chapped lips and cheeks. Neighbors admire each other's cleanliness and share gossip about the abbess's latest herbal remedy for a stomach ailment. As dusk settles, you return to the soap-drying racks and gather hardened squares. You wrap each in a strip of linen and set them in private baskets for families to carry home. You smell a gentle hint of ash lingering within the soap, a reminder of ash's power to alkalize fat. Families will store these soaps for months, using them sparingly for hair washing and clothes rinsing. Soap remains a valuable commodity. Some keep multiple bars hidden beneath kitchen floors, rationing each piece to ensure it lasts until winter. Later that night, villagers sleep between fresh linen sheets washed in scented water. They dream of river dips and foamy tubs where soap chased away dirt. In morning light, they will gather again to harvest more rose petals and orange peels. Each day's work ensures that soap and scented waters remain in ample supply, for medieval folk hygiene rested on ash and fat, on flowers and fruit skins, and on labor shared with kitchen and hearth. In every soapy trough and scented bath, they find a balm against the grime of daily toil. Once the scented waters have cooled, villagers gather brushes and bundles of fresh herbs to enrich their nightly washes. A small group of women set about collecting lavender sprigs and rosemary tips from the abbey garden. Each sprig offers a fragrant oil that soothes the skin. The women tie bunches with strips of linen, then dip them into tubs of warm water infused with rose petals. As they stir the mixture, the herbs release tiny bubbles of oil that swirl on the surface. Gentle laughter drifts across the yard as they recall stories of grandmothers who used these same herbs during baptisms and festivals. Meanwhile, a few men fetch soap bars from drying racks on the kitchen porch. They count each bar carefully, knowing that soap is as precious as a loaf of grain. A single bar will last a family several weeks when used sparingly. Today, the village mother hopes to wash her children's linen tunics once more before Sunday rest. She holds a bar in her large hand and rubs it against a small wooden palm-sized scrubbing board. The dry soap squeaks as it peels away in tiny flakes. She drops the flakes into a wooden trough of warm water and stirs with a slender green twig until the water foams. The children crowd around the trough, dipping cloths into the froth and rubbing their tunics against the smooth board. They work slowly, watching suds slide off ears and elbows. In another corner, elders place small bowls on wooden benches. Each bowl holds a mixture of fine ash and warm spring water. Into these bowls they dip soft cloths to scrub behind ears and around collars. The ash acts as a light abrasive that removes stubborn dirt. After scrubbing, they rinse cloths in fresh water and wring them out above shallow clay dishes. A neighbor brings scented oil made from infusing mint and chamomile in olive oil. She pours a small amount into each dish, so that as the water falls, the oil swirls upward. Each elder dips fingertips into the oil and rubs it on chapped lips and dry cheeks. The mint scent cleanses breath and cools spirits after a long day. Meanwhile, children fetch fresh bowls of scented water to place at doorways for those returning from the fields. Each bowl holds a cup of water, but offers a heady fragrance so that passers-by can dab hands on faces. A single dab of water carries hints of orange or rose across parched skin. Those carrying heavy loads of wood or grain pause to lean over the bowl, tipping drops onto foreheads. They press lips together and smile, savoring the faint sweetness on their tongue. In the smithy, the blacksmith pulls a small board close to glowing coals. He places a lump of lye-soaked soap onto the board and holds a pot lid over it. The heat melts the soap slowly until it sizzles. Smoke drifts upward and carries a sharp odor that stings the nose. He stirs the softened soap with a bit of wood ash, watching the texture thicken. When smooth, he dips a strip of linen into the molten soap and pours a measure onto the ridge of the forge. He uses this to clean his iron tools and the sooty bellows. The mixture cuts through black soot on hammers and tongs, leaving a faint acidic scent that lingers on leather aprons and wood beams. Across the village green, a small group of men stand beside a trough of clear water. They carry wooden combs carved from bone. Each comb has teeth spaced widely to catch lice and nits in coarse hair. They dip combs into the foamy water and comb through tangled manes. As the combs emerge, they carry clumps of tiny lice that clatter onto boards. A neighbor brings a bowl of herbs boiled in vinegar to pour over each combed head. The vinegar stings the scalp and forces out lice that escape the comb. Children cringe at the sharp smell and press cloths to their mouths to soften the odor. By mid-afternoon, the village flowerer gathers pale irises and lilac blooms. She crushes petals between her fingers above a small bowl of warm water to draw out colored juices. This water she uses to dye linen strips for bandages. When wounds appear as a result of scythe cuts or scraped knees, neighbors dip clean strips of linen into the iris water. The pale purple tinge helps hide faint stains of blood and comfort spirits. A handful of elder hushed tones describe the virtues of violet and iris in healing minor sores. At the riverbank, a handful of young women remove soapy suds from bright linen. They lay cloths on flat rocks warmed by the sun to dry. Nearby, a group of men clean sturdy woolen garments. They dip hands into a basin of water thick with soap and splash suds onto wool jackets and hose. They scrub each fold of fabric carefully, then rinse under running water. Once rinsed, they swing garments over their shoulders into bright sunlight where they flutter like flags. The color of each tunic dulls as soap washes out grime absorbed through months of labor. In the cookhouse, a mother mixes a fragrant paste for rough scrubbing of pots and pans. She scallops dried orange peels and crushes them with mortar and pestle. She adds coarse salt and ash to form a gritty mixture. With a wooden spatula, she rubs the paste against soot-stained cauldrons and iron pans. The friction removes baked-on food without chipping iron. Then she wipes each pot with a damp cloth made soft by rosewater. The metal gleams as she polishes with straw bundles wrapped tightly around twigs. As evening nears, villagers assemble straw mats near doorways. These mats they swiftly sweep with brooms of twigs and ash-infused cloth. They beat mats so that dust and leftover ash fall onto the soil. Once the mats lie flat, they lay small piles of fragrant herbs beneath the mat's corners, dill, fennel, and rosemary. As footsteps pass over the mat, fragrant oils release and herald the hope that weary souls carry home a hint of fresh air and cleanliness. Before sunset, the bathhouse bell sounds again. Late sharpening of soap and scented water ends with a gentle invitation to soak away the day's labors. Men bathe first, using rose water to rinse scrubbing boards before beginning. Women follow, each holding bowls of orange water to wash faces and arms. As dusk descends, candles set inside tall glass jars light the bathhouse corridors. The candles fill dripping wax into ceramic bowls that capture stray drips, ensuring the floor remains safe from fire. After bathing, folk wrap themselves in linen cloths dried in the sun and return to simple homes where wood stoves slumber. They carry soap squares home to family members and divine satisfaction from days' work in leaving behind grease and grime. All through the night, the scent of orange blossoms and rose drifts through windows. Each small household places a drop of scented water on the hearth at daybreak and dusk. This daily ritual ensures that soap and sweet waters remain in steady supply. Though their baths last only minutes, the memory of soft skin and fresh hues lingers. In early morning light, they recall the taste of herbal rinses and the warmth of lye soap on cold fingers. Each child and elder knows that daily toil will soon demand another scrub. Yet for now, they rest in household corners, confident that dust and dirt lie banished until tomorrow's work calls once more. Before sunrise, a small crowd gathers near the village square around a simple wooden cart drawn by a plough. Horse. The cart serves as a travelling barber surgeon's shop. Its roof is a patchwork of canvas, and its wheels rest on rough cobblestones. A bell hangs from the front beam, its clear ring carrying through narrow streets. Barbers arriving from towns beyond maintain such mobile shops when they cannot set up permanent quarters. The barber surgeon called Bartholomew steps down from the cart and smooths his linen apron. He carries a wooden bowl and razor in one hand and a small leather pouch of tools in the other. Villagers approach in order of need. A peasant farmer in his work tunic greets Bartholomew, clutching a thick wool cloak to cover his face. The barber surgeon beckons him closer and guides him to a wooden stool under a canvas canopy. Bartholomew dips a linen cloth into cold water drawn from a nearby well. He wets the farmer's coarse beard to prepare it for shaving. With his other hand, he removes a straight razor from its leather sheath. The razor glints in the early light. Bartholomew places a palm on the farmer's cheek and tilts the head slightly. The razor edge slides along the skin with practiced ease. Stubble falls in soft curls onto the cloth. The farmer winces only once when the razor nicks his chin. Bartholomew quickly presses a damp sponge of cool water onto the cut to stop bleeding. As he finishes shaving, Bartholomew asks the farmer if he has any other ailments. The farmer says that he feels weary and his joints ache. Bartholomew nods gravely and opens his leather pouch. He examines a small iron lancet and prepares to bleed the farmer's arm. Bloodletting remains a common remedy. Bartholomew wraps a strip of linen around the farmer's bice. Villagers believed that strong teeth depended on both diet and regular cleaning. At dawn, families gathered around simple wooden tables by the hearth to prepare basic tooth powders. Grandmothers crushed dried mint leaves into fine dust with a smooth stone pestle. Nearby hoops held small clay pots with crushed bark of young willow twigs. The bark contained salicylic acid, which helped reduce pain and clean teeth. Into each pot, they added a pinch of coarse salt from local salt springs. Salt acted as a mild abrasive to scrub away leftover food particles. A bit of honey served as binder so that the powder formed a paste when moistened. Children watched as elders mixed these ingredients with a drop of water from a ladle. The resulting paste smelled faintly of mint and smoke from last night's hearth fire. At midday, mothers called children to the village well to fetch fresh water. They carried clay jugs balanced atop shoulders or in hands. Some used wooden buckets and thin woven ropes to draw water. After washing their hands, they returned to brushes carved from fruit wood. These brushes resembled small twigs with ends cut into thin splinters to form bristles. The slender sticks measured nearly as long as a finger. Mothers demonstrated how to hold the brush at a shallow angle to the teeth. They pressed the bristles against teeth and gums and moved the brush in small circles. Each circular motion helped dislodge bits of bread or grain stuck between teeth. A second stroke washed the paste across surfaces of chewing teeth. Children leaned forward to watch silt wash down into a shallow earthen bowl. Once rinsed, they spat into a bucket that later served to water garden sprouts. In hamlets where water remained scarce, villagers rinsed mouths with a pinch of salt in a ceramic cup rather than with fresh water. They rattled the mixture around the mouth and spat into fields to feed small herbs and wild mustard. The salty water offered cleaning action and prevented mouth sores. Twice each week, peasants chewed small twigs from elder trees and ash trees. Each twig measured about 6 fingers long. They peeled off most of the outer bark until only inner pith remained. The pith proved fibrous and served as a natural brush when drawn across teeth. Men leaving for fields snapped off fresh sprigs before sunrise. They carried the twigs in leather pouches until mealtime, when they chewed vigorously to clean their teeth. Musty morning breath yielded to the fragrance of fresh wood as they spat pulp onto the ground. Traveling monks visiting villages taught a method of cleaning called gargling. They boiled fresh water with a handful of sage and thyme. Once the herbs infused, they poured the hot liquid into wooden bowls. Lay brothers took turns dipping small bits of charcoal from burned branches into the bowls. They swirled the charcoal gently until the water turned dark. Then they gargled, tilting heads back until the charcoal touched the throat. The charred water soothed sore throats and cleansed deeper cavities. After gargling twice each month, monks rinsed with clear water to remove residue. They claimed roaring the charcoal mist strengthened teeth and prevented decay. Villagers tried this method whenever they noticed fresh bleeding near their gums. At night time, the entire household joined in a ritual of mouth cleaning before bed. Fathers lit tallow candles to cast faint light over wooden cups and bowls on rough shelves beside the hearth. Mothers prepared bowls of warm water mixed with a few drops of vinegar and burnt sage leaves. They stirred until dark specks floated to the surface. Each child took a sip of the brew, swirled it around the mouth, and spat into a wooden bowl. The vinegar sting coaxed sleepier children to fight drowsiness and gargle thoroughly. Then they wiped mouths with cloth strips made from old linen. The cloth smelled of vinegar and herbs. Mothers hung the damp cloths on stakes driven into the floor before descending into straw beds. Tooth extraction remained a feared procedure. In villages lacking a barber surgeon, barbering fell to the miller's apprentice or to a blacksmith with steady hands. When a tooth grew infected and pain kept the jaw clenched, villagers begged a skilled neighbor to attend them. Under daylight, they prepared a crude forceps made by hammering iron rod ends into pincers. The patient sat on a low stool next to a block of wood. Children sat quietly under benches to avoid hearing the cries. A cloth dipped in warm water, mixed with ground cloves and frankincense soothed gums. The operator pressed the pincers against the damaged tooth, gripped firmly, and twisted the rod until the tooth released with a snap. A wisp of smoke rose as the operator pressed hot iron against the socket's edge, cauterizing and sealing the wound. The patient held a cloth of chilled wine against the empty socket to quell bleeding. Rich landowners hired itinerant dentists who carried small chests filled with tools like curved needles and hollow pipes. The itinerant dentist arrived at dawn on horseback. He wore a coarse canvas robe and carried a satchel of dried herbs and powders. He first examined each tooth with a narrow iron probe carved at the tip to expose cavities. He filled rotten teeth with a paste of crushed beeswax and sweet iron ore that hardened in shape of the missing tooth. This rudimentary filling allowed landowners to chew bread with less pain. He also carved small gold wires into the roots of loose teeth to hold them in place. Each field worker watched the exotic process with awe. Later villagers whispered about the dentist's origin in faraway lands where men spoke strange tongues and created medicines from fish or moss. In monasteries, hygienic customs rose to a ritual discipline. Monks sat in long stone troughs known as lavatoriums before meals. Each lavatorium possessed a continuous flow of water drawn from spring and guided through wooden channels. Monks dipped ewers and poured water over hands, then scrubbed fingertips with a small bit of powdered pumice stone mixed with water. They rinsed their hands and left droplets on stone ledges for novices and infirm brothers. Placing brushes made from goat hair on wooden racks beside the lavatorium, they ensured brushes remained dry and free of pests. After meals, each monk took a small bite of crushed rosemary and thyme to neutralize odors. In coastal villages, fishermen used salt from the sea as a cleaning agent. They smeared their teeth with wet salt rubbed along each surface before rinsing with seawater. The salty brine removed fish oils clinging to enamel. They then rinsed with fresh water to avoid dental erosion. A fisherman strolling along the shore at dawn grabbed handfuls of seawater in moss-stuffed cloth hoods and wrung it into hollowed wooden gourds. The gourds carried fresh seawater back to shore where small groups sat on driftwood and scrubbed teeth vigorously. Guild apprentices in towns where guilds regulated barbers required lecture before performing tooth pulling. A traveling barber surgeon visited the guild hall with a demonstration set up of wooden dummies carved with tooth-like nubs. On these dummies, the barber surgeon showed how to position pincers and apply force without splitting jaw. Apprentices observed and practiced on wax models. Each teacher stressed the importance of speed to minimize agony. After several weeks of practice, apprentices received small iron lancets to make shallow cuts. Only then did they qualify to attend actual villages. In remote hamlets, absence of skilled practitioners meant that parents applied herbal pastes to soothe teething children. A warm poultice of chamomile and crushed cloves went on baby's cheek to reduce inflammation. Parents tied a thin strip of linen around the wrist, soaked in cold broth to ease fever. Villagers believed that applying a bit of honey, mixed with crushed mint into baby's mouth, would grant strong gums when teeth emerged. Through all these practices, villagers learned that prevention remained as important as treatment. They warned children to avoid excessive sweets such as honey or dried fruit. They instructed that a small sip of beer after dinner helped wash away bits of grain stuck between teeth. They advised against chewing on hard stones or metal highway nails, which could crack enamel. Instead, they chewed on soft bread crusts to remove stubborn bits. Many hoped that good nightly brushing with ash and salt would ward off decay. As evening shadows lengthened, the barber surgeon's cart rattled toward the village boundary. Bartholomew packed his razors and pincers into leather pouches and hung them from hooks beneath the cart's seat. He bid farewell to villagers who promised to meet again at next week's market day. Children waved small wooden toothbrushes and chewed on tiny sticks wrapped in soaked cloth. The villagers returned to their hearths where wives prepared broth and bread. Wood smoke rose through chimneys to carry away midday odors. Each family settled into their homes with the knowledge that their teeth remained as clean as could be expected. They closed doors and snuffed candles, carrying into sleep memories of clove sting, mustard seed burn, and comfort of cooled vinegar. Tomorrow they would rise again to face peasant life, where tooth pain and shaving met simple remedies and razor edge alike. Before dawn, a group of women, girls, and a handful of young boys walk barefoot to the riverside, where mist clings to reeds. Each carries a woven basket filled with soiled garments wrapped in cloth. The river flows gently over smooth stones, its current cold against their ankles. Some carry bundles of linen shirts and shifts, while others hold thicker woolen hose and blankets. No one complains of the chill, for the labor ahead demands focus more than comfort. They form a line along shallow banks. The first woman kneels in the water, untying her bundle and loosening mud from hems. She places each garment on a flat stone that rises slightly above the current. With hands cupped around the cloth, she soaks it in the stream and presses it to the stone's surface. She uses a wooden beater, carved with simple grooves, to pound away grime. Each strike echoes on the stone, sending ripples through the water. A child at her side dips a small clay bowl to catch rinsed water and splashes it back over the cloth to remove suds and ash used as a cleanser. In another spot, a young mother kneels beside a man who helps rinse a large woolen blanket. They dip it repeatedly into deeper water, allowing the current to wash away soap residue. The man uses a small stick to agitate the wool, ensuring the fibers do not mat and shrink. When the blanket appears clean, they lay its heavy length over a sturdy willow branch that bends under its weight. The blanket drapes down in long folds that sway gently in the breeze. As sunlight intensifies, water drips onto grass, leaving damp patches that glisten in the morning light. Nearby, a group of girls works at a second station where wooden tubs stand half filled with water. The tubs rest on pebble banks close to the shore. They scoop water with wooden mugs from the river and pour it into each tub, adding handfuls of crushed soapwort scrub. The soapwort creates light foam that floats on the water's surface. They toss linen shifts into the tub and knead them under the bubbling water. Each garment bears stains of sweat from fields and smudges of soot from hearth fires. They scrub collars and cuffs, then rub cloth to extract sudsy water. They lay clean shirts on flat rocks to catch the sun. In the open field beyond the river, washerwomen have stretched clotheslines between saplings. Sheets, tunics, and hose hang like tapestries, their edges flapping in the breeze. As the morning sun climbs skyward, garments dry quickly. Each piece casts a shadow on dew-soaked grass, where sparrows peck for insects disturbed by human footsteps. White shifts stand out among darker woolen tunics, and the scent of linen mingles with herbs crushed by boots. Returning to the river, a group of men wade in with heavy leather sacks containing woolen blankets too large for tubs. They hold blankets so water rinses deep within fibers. After several minutes, they lift blankets onto nearby boulders. They beat them with wooden paddles to drive out trapped water and lingering dirt. Each strike releases a small plume of dust. They wear no shoes, so they feel each ripple of cold water in their feet and ankles. By midday, the riverbank activity reaches a lull. Clothing rests on rocks, baskets empty and set aside. Villagers gather to share a simple meal of bread and cheese. Hungry children nibble at crumbs and then rush back to play among garments. They chase each other around willows, stepping lightly to avoid puddles. Mothers clap lightly, reminding them that clean laundry needs care until dry. A gentle wind carries the scent of fresh cloth over fields of barley, interrupting faint odors of goats and sheep tethered nearby. While clothes dry, townsfolk begin the ritual of airing out the village. Town gates remain open, and a group of youths sets bundles of dried lavender and rosemary at each entrance. They hope that fragrant herbs will mask lingering odors from latrines and cooking fires. Elders walk the main lane with incense burners fashioned from clay. They fill each burner with smoldering charcoal and dried sage. The rising smoke carries a pungent aroma that clings to hanging garments and the few fresh linens drying on lines. Children watch the smoke swirl overhead, imagining distant places where people burn herbs while dancing. Villagers carry benches, stools, and straw mats into the street for airing. They set straw mats on rooftops, letting dew from early morning evaporate as sun warms surfaces. They alight upon rooftops with baskets, arranging linen sheets on the straw. The sun bleaches stains left from sweat and smoke. When laundry stands bright and fresh, women fold each piece and carry garments back to homes. Neighbors stop to admire crisp linen and remark on the cloth's strength after soapy wash. They swear that washing twice a month keeps moths away and prevents fleas from hiding in fabric. Inside homes, fire begins to crackle beneath large cauldrons. Water heats to scalding temperatures and fill tubs for final rinses. Women drop small handfuls of lavender blossoms into boiling water. As they stir, fragrant steam erupts and fills kitchens. Children gather spoons and small cups to taste tiny droplets of scented water. Mothers warn them not to drink too much, for the liquid remains too strong for tender stomachs. Instead, they spritz the water onto cloth napkins and place them around necks to refresh spirits. In wealthier households, servants prepare a scented soak for sheets and blankets. They boil chaff from wheat husks in water to create a light brew. They mix this with rose water from the apothecary. They fill large tubs in the courtyard with the scented water and load linen sheets onto ropes above. The breeze carries a sweet perfume across courtyards and into adjacent chambers. Servants take small cloths, soaked in scented water, to polish wooden floors and wipe down tables. Each stroke spreads fragrance and removes dust that drifted in with laundry activity. Communal meals occur around midday to rally spirits after hours of labor. Neighbors carry earthen bowls of porridge and pieces of hard cheese to the riverbank. They sit on small benches carved from logs and dip spoons into shared bowls. When full, they lean back against cool stones and listen to water gurgle. Conversation turns to next month's market day and far-off news of goods arriving from distant lands. Some children point at loaded caravans seen on the horizon, their wonder momentarily eclipsing thoughts of laundry. By late afternoon, laundry nears completion. Blankets hang on thinnest branches of tall oaks. Woolen hose dangle from fence posts. Women pass to fold garments with care, grouping shift and shirt and mantle on neat piles to carry home. Each basket of cleaned linen returns to a home interior where mattresses receive fresh coverings. Straw mats once used for drying now line the beds to absorb any remaining dampness. Pillows stuffed with feathers and herbs lie atop fresh blankets, ready for evening rest. At sunset, the village prepares a different kind of airing. Ovens idle as daily baking concludes. People open windows in kitchens and common halls. They remove straw bundles beneath benches for airing on roof eaves. Doors swing open to allow cool evening air to drift through corridors. Children chase fireflies in the courtyard while elders use straw wands to fan embers from hearth fires. As smoke curls through chimneys, fresh laundry scents rise from linen laid on rooftops earlier. The mingled aromas of straw and lavender drift across streets. Executions of stale odors require torchlight at night. A group of townsmen carries burning torches made from pine wood dipped in resin. They walk narrow lanes where dwellings stand close together. Each torch's flame licks damp timber, creating acrid smoke that clings to walls and floors. They pause at suspected spots, blowing embers outward to distribute smoke below windows and through cracks indoors. Householders hang thick curtains to trap smoke and let it clear corners where stale air collects. By dusk, the river's swirling waters carry away soap and dirt. Dark garments hang limp in the moonlight. Streams of water reflect stars above. Villagers return home with baskets nearly empty and hands still damp. Each person feels the cool evening breeze on face and clothes. They enter warm homes, close doors, and light small candles. Sleep beckons, but the fragrance of clean linen and herbs lingers in rooms. On mattresses, they breathe deeply of straw beneath and blankets above, ready to rest after a day shaped by river, soap, and sun. When dawn returns, the cycle will begin anew. Dirt and sweat will accumulate once more. River washing, scented soaks, and airing rituals will repeat. But for this one day, villagers rest beneath fresh linen, secure in knowledge that each riverbank stone and steaming tub serve to cleanse cloth and spirit alike. In a world defined by labor and dust, clean laundry earns its brilliance under sun and wind, promising that even simple cloth can carry the promise of renewal. By late morning, the sun stands high overhead, and the sheets, shirts, and hose laid out along the fence lines have begun to dry. Women and children move along the lines, inspecting each piece of cloth for damp spots and smoke. They tug gently on corners to let breezes flow between folds. A young woman drapes a freshly washed bedsheet across a low fence made from split logs. The sheet ripples like a sail as wind passes beneath. She straightens one corner and pats the linen to remove lingering creases before tidying it to hang more evenly. Nearby, two sisters adjust a woolen cloak so that its folds face the sun most directly. Wool must receive long hours of sun to prevent mildew and moths from making nests. They share a wooden hairbrush to dust stray ash from the fabric while they wait. Across the yard, an older woman hangs a large blanket over the branch of a sturdy apple tree. The tree's bark scratches faint lines in the cloth, but provides a high vantage where air circulates freely. Butterflies flit through the branches as the blanket unwraps a faint scent of lavender that's soaked in during its wash. The lavender helps ward off insects. The woman presses her face near the tree to breathe deeply, inhaling the sweet floral aroma. She marvels at how the sun brings out the soft glow in pale linens and makes bold stripes in dyed wool. Children, tasked with tending to remove the laundry at dusk, play among the laundry poles in shifts. They race to see who can fold shirts into neat squares and stack them in wicker baskets fastest. A small boy fetches a damp sheet that still carries traces of river water. He runs his fingers along the cloth, feeling cool moisture. He reminds his older sister to lift it to higher grass where dew will evaporate faster. They work together, to ensure no piece dries half inside and half out, which would leave mildew stains along edges. As the noon sun shifts west, townsfolk move outside to air out buildings. A farmer carries a bundle of dried rosemary and thyme. He places sprigs in baskets spread along windowsills of the bakehouse. When the door opens to let fresh loaves slip onto wooden shelves, a gentle scent of herbs drifts inside. The baker uses a rough cloth to wipe surfaces clean and to dust flour from counters. He smears a drop of oil on the door frame so the door swings quietly, preserving the scented air inside. In the mill courtyard, millers unstop flour bins and allow fine dust to drift away harmlessly on a breeze rather than collect in hidden corners. They remove wooden paddles from the millstone pit and scrub them with wet linen dipped in soap and rye bran. Each paddle dries in the sun before being replaced behind the sturdy door. They leave the door slightly ajar so air passes through and carries away faint odors of spoiled grain or rodent remnants. Across the road, a small inn sets mats across its floor and opens all shutters wide. The innkeeper sprinkles handfuls of sweet herbs into hearth embers and coaxes smoke to curl through open windows. Guests seated at rough-hewn tables sip watered wine while listening to crackling embers. The herbal smoke pushes out stale odors of spilled ale and worn boots. The innkeeper's wife carries mint and pennyroyal to each doorway and tucks handfuls beneath benches so visitors take a scent of fresh mint to their beds. Each bedchamber boasts a bunch of dried lavender hanging from a nail near the wooden window latch. In the village square, the minders of the town well build a small fire near the stone mouth. They braid sheaves of straw and leave them to smolder slowly. As the sun warms straw, embers glow red and grey smoke arcs upward. Villagers carry water to religious shrines near the well, dampening stone steps so that smoke clings to moisture and drifts across paths. They believe that smoke from straw purifies any foul spores that rise from stagnant water below. A boy dips his hand into the well, lifts water to lips, then blows bubbles gently to release air. He knows that fresh movement of water reduces stagnant smells. Neighbors congregate near open doorways to air out halls. In a home where a hearth fire burned overnight, smoke residue darkened beams. The family opened the front door and lifted a straw bundle into flames on the doorstep. The straw burned quickly, sending a wisp of pale smoke into the dawn air. They used a broom made of birch twigs to sweep each board floor. Loose ash drifted toward the doorway and out into the courtyard. When the sweeping ended, Mother poured a cup of scented water, infused with rose petals along the cracks between floorboards. The water seeped into wood and carried away residual dust. She called children inside to kneel and mop floors with linen cloth dipped in the same scented water. The cloths released a gentle rose perfume that countered smoky stench. At midday, a traveling peddler enters town, wheeling a wheelbarrow laden with small wooden chests filled with fresh lavender, rosemary, and dried flowers. He rings a small bell to attract trade. Women pause in their laundry work to purchase small pouches of lavender for 15 copper coins. They pay and tuck these pouches into linen pillowcases to ensure fresh scent at night. Others buy small bunches of rosemary to hang in barns near stored grain. They believe that the scent wards off mice and insects that would spoil grains. As afternoon settles, the local cobbler sets aside his tools to air out his workshop. He removes piles of leather scraps that stood for months in one corner. He spreads the scraps on a low bench beneath an open window. He sweeps the floor vigorously to lift dust and leftover shoe shavings. Into a pan, he pours water and adds a handful of crushed rosemary to simmer. He uses a rag to wipe wooden bench surfaces, leaving a faint herbal scent behind. He then carries a small tray of burning cedar chips around the workshop to burn away the lingering smell of wet leather. Smoke curls through open windows, and he closes his eyes to breathe in the resinous aroma. Further down the main lane, a tanner's yard remains full of vats where hides soaked last night in urine and oak bark. He stirs each vat with a long pole and checks the hide surfaces for signs of pests. To clear the pungent odor of the tanning vats, he burns bundles of dried sage along the perimeter. He sets the sage bundles on overturned buckets and lights them with a flint. Smoke rises in thick blue-grey tendrils. Hens squawk and scatter as the smell grows stronger. He allows smoke to pour over vats and surrounding area so that pests flee in panic. After an hour, he opens a side door to let the air change. As dusk approaches, villagers return to retrieve linens and clothes. Women move quickly along fence lines to collect dry garments before nightfall. They fold each piece neatly, the scent of lavender and sunshine still clinging to fibers. Children lie linen shirts folded on hay mattresses, dreaming of crisp sheets beneath their heads. The last sheets come down from clotheslines when lantern light first flickers. Parents carry laundry inside, where they wrap each bundle in straw to absorb any dew. By sunset, each cottage stands more than tidy. Doorways smell of mint and sweeping. Homes breathe fresh air. The village shimmers with quiet brightness as people settle near hearths. They prepare simple meals of porridge sweetened with berries and honey. The aroma of cooking cinnamon drifts through windows that remain open to prevent the interior from growing stale. At nightfall, torches flicker along the main thoroughfare. Torchbearers carry pine torches dipped in resin to light paths. The resin crackles and sparks, sending tiny embers into the air. Torchlight glints on freshly swept lanes and charred straw left from midday burnings. Villagers keep windows open a crack to let herbs continue scenting interiors at night. Each cottage's hearth glows gently, warding off dampness and must. Children drift to sleep with pillowcases fluffy and blankets free of dust. They carry the scent of lavender into dreams where they play among open fields. Farmers rise early the next morning to fetch water and to inspect thatch on roofs and fences around the yard where laundry once hung. The dew settles on wood and straw, so they must let the rising sun burn away moisture before setting out to fields. Each family carries new pouches of lavender to replenish pillowcases. As dawn arrives again, villagers prepare for the tasks ahead, confident that clean clothes and fresh air have fortified home bodies. They recall yesterday's rituals of river washing and herbal smokes. In each step, from sunlit riverbank to lantern-lit lane, they celebrate care of cloth and community. Though work never ends, each sunrise offers a new chance to cleanse garments and homes, renewing spirit and fortifying bonds between neighbors who share water and fresh air alike. Before dawn, a cookwoman woke and kindled the hearth fire in the kitchen. She carried a clay bowl of cold water from the well and set it on a rough wooden shelf. In the dim light, she gathered a broom made of straw bound to a wooden handle and swept the floor. The floor was packed earth smoothed over years of foot traffic. Scattered bits of grain and straw remained from the previous day. She swept those into a small pile to be fed to pigs or scattered in the yard as bedding. Each stroke of the broom lifted dust that settled back down as still air returned. She repeated the motion until the floor looked free of visible debris. Next, she turned to the central hearth where ashes smoldered beneath a cauldron. She scooped the cool ashes into a small basket kept for that purpose. The ashes went to a pit outside, where they mixed with water to make lye for soap or to kill vegetation around pathways. Removing ashes from the hearth prevented sparks from igniting stray straw on the floor. She then raked the coals into the center and laid fresh logs atop them. Flames snapped up and warmed the blackened kettle perched above. As the kettle began to warm, she fetched a bowl of water and rinsed a wooden table surface used for kneading dough. She sprinkled a handful of fresh ashes into a small heap on the table and then scrubbed with a rag dipped in vinegar. The vinegar and ash acted together to scour away grease and sticky syrup that dripped during meal preparation. She wiped the surface clean with a cloth rinsed in warm water. Each cloth had a small charm of sage sewn to its corner to ward off flies once laid nearby. The table emerged looking nearly new, though its rough grain still showed faint black streaks from past meals. A servant boy entered with a bucket of waste food collected from the previous night's supper. He carried scraps of meat and peels of vegetables. Those scraps he dumped into a clay bowl near the door. She instructed him to take the bowl outside at midday to feed the chickens and the pigs. That way, the waste did not linger near living spaces where flies gathered. On the floor near the door, she placed a woven mat, sprinkled with crushed mint leaves. Each foot that crossed picked up a hint of mint, a practice known to repel insects. In the corner, a wooden bench held dirty cooking pots and utensils. She dipped them into warm water in a separate trough and began to scrub. With a split willow branch, she beat the base of each pot to dislodge charred bits. When soot loosened from the bottom, she scoured with coarse sand mixed into a paste of water. She rinsed the paste off and set each pot upside down on a rack so water could drain away. She repeated the process for spoons and ladles carved from wood. Each utensil she wiped dry with a cloth scented with rosemary before placing it back in its place. In another corner of the room stood a small basket of herbs and dried flowers. She plucked sprigs of lavender and tied them to the walls beneath a window. Lavender scent carried through the air and discouraged flies from landing on cooking surfaces. She also hung bundles of mint and pennyroyal near the hearth so that steam rising from pots released herbal aromas that soothed the nose and drove pests away. At midday, she swept the floor again, this time focusing on areas beneath benches where stray grains and breadcrumbs collected. A single piece of bread left on the table could draw a swarm of flies in hours. She used a brush made of bark strips to scrape each crevice between boards where crumbs hid. The brush flicked crumbs into a basket that she later emptied into the yard before sunset. When visitors arrived, she ensured that the long wooden table stood clean. They seated themselves on rough stools carved from oak. The table bore simple earthenware bowls and cups. She passed around platters of bread and bowls of stew made from barley and vegetables. As the meal ended, she dipped cloths into cool water with vinegar and wiped off the table until no stain remained. She poured water into a tub placed nearby for wash water. Each guest dipped a cloth, washed hands, and wiped them on the straw mat outside. In the evening, she returned to the hearth to extinguish any remaining embers. She stamped out small flames and raked coals to one side. She then sprinkled a handful of ashes atop the coals to smother them fully. The hearth remained safe from stray sparks that could resume fire once the home grew dark. While the hearth cooled, she turned to disposing of night waste. Lantern light flickered as she carried a small shovel outdoors. She stepped lightly across the packed earth to a shallow pit dug near the privy. Into that pit, she tossed the bowl of scraps collected earlier. She knew that burying food waste slowed the spread of maggots and rotting odor. Flies preferred warm meat on the ground rather than scraps hidden beneath soil. She covered the bowl with a thin layer of ashes and a scattering of fresh soil before returning inside. Inside the room, she prepared beds for the night. Straw mattresses lay on raised wooden platforms. She sprinkled clean straw with a handful of dried lavender and mint to freshen both tapestry and air. Villagers believed that herbs on sleeping surfaces staved off bad smells and deterred insects from crawling into blankets. She fluffed each mattress so that the layer of straw distributed evenly. Next, she attended to the table once more. She wiped its surface with a damp cloth soaked in vinegar and ash to remove any lingering grease. Then she scattered a small handful of crushed sage leaves along its edge. The pungent scent ensured that flies remained outside once night fell. As the hearth fire cooled, she swept the floor a final time. Dust settled quickly under the still air of nighttime. She pressed the broom lightly against the earth floor and guided stray bits of straw and ashes toward the door. Outside, a guard pulled a lantern from a hook and lit the flame inside its glass enclosure. He placed the lantern by the threshold to provide faint light for the cookwoman to see as she closed the door behind her. In a separate room served by the same hearth, children prepared for bed. Their mother dipped rags in warm water and wiped their hands and faces. She used leftover herbal water from the hearth to rinse small hands. She held each child's face and whispered words of comfort while rinsing away the day's dust. She then brushed each child's hair with a wooden comb carved from bone. The comb ridges removed loose dirt and bits of straw from tangled locks. A small dab of rose water on cloth, wiped around eyes and lips, completed the nightly ritual. Upstairs servants scattered straw on the floor near a small window. The window remained open a crack to allow air to move through the narrow passage. As night deepened, a cool breeze entered and carried away fumes of cooking oil and ash that lingered from the hearth. The servants bent over the straw and removed larger pebbles they discovered, then laid out straw more evenly so that shoes would not grind dirt onto bedroom mats. Each servant arranged a small bundle of lavender under the child-sized beds upstairs. In the early hours, a milkmaid arrived with fresh milk in wooden pails. She stepped into the courtyard and carried her pails to a small lean to where the hearth's warmth would keep milk from souring too quickly. The cookwoman rose once more to pour a small measure into a pan set over coals. As the milk warmed, she stirred grains of barley to prepare a light porridge for a sick neighbor. She kept the porridge smooth by stirring slowly and ensuring that each grain softened fully. In the process, the kitchen remained free of stray ashes or spilled milk, as she wiped the pan's rim with a cloth before pouring into a wooden bowl for delivery. Latrine maintenance occurred during quiet hours before morning chores. A farmhand carried a bucket to the privy and emptied the chamber pot into a deep hole. He turned the soil to cover the waste immediately. Then he sprinkled sifted wood ash into the pit to absorb moisture and prevent flies from breeding. He carried a small stick to stir loose earth atop the waste before returning to his stable. In this way, the latrine remained dry and less odorous until the next emptying. Back in the kitchen, the cookwoman prepared tea using dried chamomile and mint. She poured hot water into wooden mugs and passed them around to the household. The herbal infusion soothed throats raw from smoke and soot. Each person sipped quietly while observing the clean state of the kitchen and dining area. Children sat on low benches near the hearth, stomping small feet on straw mats to chase away stray insects. Once the porridge left for the neighbor, the cookwoman took a final moment to inspect each surface. She pressed cloth to the underside of table legs to catch dust. She thrust a cloth into the gap beneath the hearthstones to clear ash. She tapped on clay floor edges to dislodge loose stones. Each tap released tiny particles that she swept with her broom before standing upright. As dawn approached again, the household fulfilled its cycle of care. Kitchens remained free of gathering grime. Tables stood ready for the next meal. Waste disposal kept flies at bay. At every step, the cookwoman ensured that floors remained swept, hearths remained safe, and air remained fresh with herbs. Each action prevented the spread of odors and disease. In that simple order lay the heart of hygienic practice in the household, an early world of dirt and pests bound back into cleanliness by water, ash, herbs, and steady labor. As dawn breaks over the village, a handful of laborers gather to dig a new privy in the common field behind the barns. The ground here remains firm after months of summer heat, and the laborers swing shovels into earth studded with stones. They remove stones by hand and set them aside, while carefully excavating a narrow shaft, nearly 6 feet deep and 3 feet wide. Each man takes turns scooping away soil with a spade and passing dirt down in woven baskets to companions who deposit it at a pile well beyond the edge of the field. Beneath the topsoil they reach clay, and the clay walls maintain shape without collapsing. They shape the bottom of the shaft into a slight depression so that waste will collect at the deepest point. Once the hole reaches the proper depth, they use wooden planks to fashion a simple seat over the opening. A crossbeam laid across the shaft supports a seat carved from oak planks, with a roughly oval hole cut into its center. The planks rest on sturdy posts, set into the ground on either side of the pit. Nearby, a stack of stones and earth waits to seal the hole when it finally fills. Villagers refer to this new privy as the common latrine. Families living closest to the barns agree to use it rather than dig their own pits. The practice helps reduce the number of scattered holes across farmland and concentrates waste in one manageable location. When the laborers finish, they place a low railing of split logs around the seat to support a simple roof of thatch. The roof gives modest privacy and shields users from rain. A curtain of rough linen hangs from a rope, though the cloth tends to shrink and tear quickly, requiring frequent replacement. Inside each home, chamber pots serve as a household's primary means of private relief. Each chamber pot stands on a small stool near the hearth in a corner of the main room. At first light, a child or servant appears to attend to the pots. They lift the ceramic vessel, which often bears a simple painted flower motif, and carry it carefully outdoors to the chamber pot pit. This pit sits behind the main latrine area, dug shallow and lined with stones. Each morning, the child pours chamber pot contents into the pit, watching urine bubble upon contact with earth. The ammonia smell rises sharply in colder air. After emptying the pot, they rinse it with a bucket of water drawn from the well and scrub the interior with ash and a bundle of straw. They then carry the clean pot back to its indoor stool, tipping it upside down to allow residual drips to fall onto a scrap of linen placed beneath. With midday heat rising, fly larvae multiply within the pits, unless covered daily. A small group of able-bodied villagers mixes fresh soil with lime in a wooden tub. They form a coarse mortar that they sprinkle over the pit's top. The lime helps neutralize foul odors and deters flies. Each hush of lime dust into the pit prompts neighbors to cover their mouths. When the pit fills to near the brim, overseers mark the spot to dig a new privy in another field location. The old pit receives a final layer of earth and stones, sealed to bury contents deeply. A child then sows grass seed over this patch so that green shoots appear in the following weeks. While the privies serve field workers, a rudimentary drainage system begins to take shape near the bakehouse. As loaves cool, bakers sweep charred crumbs and ashes from the hearth. They pour small buckets of water mixed with vinegar down a stone channel worn into the courtyard surface. The channel leads toward a narrow trench lined with flat stones that run downhill to the edge of a grassy slope. This trench collects leftover washing water and dishwater from the communal table. Villagers call it the washway. Each evening they flush the washway by pouring 2 buckets of fresh river water into its upper end. The water rushes down the stone channel, carrying away residues of grease and flour. By the next morning, fish and frogs have claimed the shallow pool at the trench's end, feeding on bits swept away from the bakehouse. As the day wears on, the church sexton visits each home to collect chamber pots from wealthier parishioners who pay a small fee. He travels with 2 wooden yokes across his shoulders, each holding a stool and its empty chamber pot. One by one, he visits each home, lifts the pot, and replaces it with a fresh, clean one. He carries the filled pot to a larger cart where he dumps the contents into a barrel. This barrel, lined with clay, sits at the edge of the village moat. The water in the moat moves slowly, and the barrel empties directly into its currents. Villagers believe that the moat's slow-moving water carries waste downstream to pastures used for grazing, where it fertilizes grass for cattle. Children run after the sexton to watch as water mixed with excrement seeps into the moat, feeding ducklings and waterfowl as they paddle near the bank. When the sexton finishes his rounds, he visits the bakehouse to collect any pails of washing water and leftover crumbs collected near the hearth. He stops at the washway, lifts the lid covering a short trench near the bakehouse door, and dumps the contents of the pails into the trench. Each rinse of the pail sends stale water down the channel. The sexton then pours a handful of wood ash into the trench to lighten odors. Neighbors gather to watch his work, waiting with bowls of soup offered as thanks. In wealthier homes, a simple drain runs from the kitchen hearth to a small cesspit below the house foundations. During house construction, a pit was dug beneath the lowest level and lined with bricks salvaged from old temple ruins. The drain consists of clay pipes carved with simple hollow tubes. Each pipe section measures a foot long and a palm wide. When assembled, the pipes connect kitchen floor directly to the cesspit. Servants pour wash water and melted fat down the drain. The initial wash sends bubbling water into the pit, where solid bits sink and decompose. The homeowners close a wooden hatch covering the pipe's entrance each night to block flies from entering. A child helps by tightening a lid built from a wooden ring covered with cloth. The suffused darkness and lack of fresh air slow decay, though unpleasant odors sometimes seep into the lower kitchen. During feasts at the manor hall, the steward dedicates a small side chamber as a temporary latrine. The chamber stands off the main hall by a narrow corridor. Underneath the chamber floor, a pit awaits, lined with stones. The steward orders servants to fill basins with clean water mixed with crushed rosemary and mint to keep the chamber fresh. They place the basins next to daybeds where elderly lords and guests can relieve themselves or rest in privacy. When the pit nears fullness, the steward calls in labourers to seal it with earth and extend the corridor by a few feet to dig a new pit. While this occurs, the chamber remains closed and odourless mats hung over the doorway keep insects at bay. In towns with greater resources, rudimentary sewers appear beneath main streets. A council initiative began to dig shallow trenches beneath bricks, later covered again once complete. The trenches run along each side of the street, collecting runoff from street cleaning and wastewater from households. Each segment of the trench measures wide enough for a small child to crawl through. Once a week, a labourer descends into the trench, carrying a bucket tied to a thick rope. Using a small scraper fashioned from iron, he loosens debris and silt from the bottom. He scoops silt into the bucket and hauls it up to street level. Villagers gather nearby to toss handfuls of ash into the open trench, reducing foul odours. The silt fills a wheelbarrow and is carted away to nearby gardens where it enriches the soil. When the trenches run clear, the labourer calls for the mayor's approval to cover them again with brick. The result is a cleaner street, though residents remain cautious not to pour kitchen scraps directly into the open drains. At midday, the village watchman inspects each latrine and frequented chamber pot disposal area. He carries a rattan basket of fresh mint and pennyroyal to scatter near each privy entrance. He believes that the mint smoke from burning pennyroyal wards off flies that carry disease. He lights small bundles at each location and watches embers glow before tucking them into straw beneath the privy seat. The smoke permeates the air, drawing curious dogs and birds away from the pits. Villagers applaud as he completes the rounds, for they know that standing water in pits shapes the breeding grounds for mosquitoes and gnats. Beyond privies and chamber pots, schools and workshops face hygiene challenges. A master weaver cleans pelt beds in the workshop each morning. He soaks worn fabric in a trough of water mixed with salted ash. He scrubs hides to remove animal fats left from tanning. Once cleaned, he hangs pelts from racks to dry in open air. He then sweeps the workshop floor to collect shards of plant fibers that no longer adhere to looms. The weaving area smells faintly of charred wood from looms frictioning metal parts. He sprinkles lavender buds on the floor near entrances to soften odors. As afternoon wanes, families gather at the communal forge to collect tools scrubbed clean of charred metal. The blacksmith sweeps cinders from each anvil and wipes down hammer handles with cloth soaked in vinegar. He places wooden boards on the forge floor to absorb oil drips. Each board smells of vinegar and pine smoke when hardened. At dusk, the village gathers around a large bonfire beyond the fields. They toss into the flames old baskets of straw used for bedding and bundles of spoilt clothing that could not be salvaged. The fire's heat sterilizes the straw and destroys lice that might have lingered. Children sit on benches near the fire, roasting chestnuts and watching sparks drift into the darkening sky. The cracked, glowing embers rise high before cooling into red coals that glow faintly. By nightfall, each privy remains covered, each chamber pot stored in its proper corner. The small drains beneath the street lie hidden and silent. As the village drifts into slumber, shadows shine against moonlit roofs. The memory of dust and flies fades beneath memory of fresh air and herbal scent. Tomorrow, the labor of digging new pits, emptying chambers, and cleaning drains will resume. For in this world of raw earth and simple tools, hygiene demands daily vigilance. Dawn's first light brought villagers to the churchyard where thick braziers of incense smouldered on stone pedestals. Priests ladled fresh embers into iron bowls and sprinkled pine needles and resin atop them. The fragrant smoke rose in pale lavender plumes, drifting over graves and walkways. Locals breathed deep as the scent of frankincense and myrrh replaced the dank smell of damp earth. Fathers carried bundles of sweet wood chips to hearths in modest homes. They sprinkled chips onto smouldering embers each morning, so that wisps of scented smoke filled every hearth chamber. Women tied small bunches of rosemary, lavender, and chamomile into linen posies. They dashed along lanes, pinning posies to door hinges. Passers-by pressed posies briefly to their noses to ward off lingering stench from open cesspits and animal pens. In narrow market alleys, onion stalls and butcher shops jostled beside overflowing privies. Stallkeepers hung pomanders made from wood apple halves, hollowed and packed with cinnamon sage clove buds and dried rose petals. They tied pomanders to leather cords and wore them as necklaces or hung them from stall beams. Customers sniffed pomanders eagerly to dull the smell of cured meat and spilled ale. Bakers set out brass bowls filled with vinegar, infused with strewn basil and mint. Shoppers dipped cloth squares into bowls and dabbed wrists and temples. The sharp tang of vinegar stung until a cool herbal freshness remained. Each public vendor kept a small flagon of vinegar at hand to wipe counters and sweep away the stench of fish and goats. At midday, in the manor hall, a servant swung a censer of charred incense during a feast. The oak beams above bore stains of centuries of smoke. As he swung the censer in slow arcs, guests sensed relief from reek of bodies pressed close at wooden tables. The incense draped over tapestries and hunting trophies, coating them with resinous fragrance. After feast ended, women dispersed small satchels of sweet sandalwood and rosewater into corners of sleeping chambers. They knew that stale body heat invited swarms of flies and fleas. Each satchel contained crushed herbs, bound in gauze, that released perfume slowly and concealed odors from damp tapestries and woolen blankets. Traveling monks taught villagers to carry sprigs of rue and pennyroyal tucked into garments. These bitter herbs held strong aromas that repelled insects and masked musty odors of damp straw. Men working fields, burdened with livestock, clipped sprigs and tucked them behind shirt collars. As sweat mingled with herbal oils, a sharp scent rose to keep flies at bay. Children wove tiny wreaths of lavender to hang from bedposts. Each evening when families retired, they pressed a single flower into a bowl of wine placed at bedside. The wine's warm sweetness mingled with lavender's floral spice, so that the night air felt cleaner. Each household maintained a jug of sour ale vinegar, mixed with crushed orange peels. When dinner served fish or game, women sieved vinegar over serving boards and wiped tables to catch pungent residue. They hung small clove spikes in vinegar to improve potency as days passed. The vinegar solution glowed amber and burned eyes when poured over surfaces, but it left behind a brisk, clean scent that lingered until well after the meal. By nightfall, the streets hushed and braziers burned low. Men walked from tavern to tavern, swinging small censers of frankincense and juniper. Each step released fragrant smoke that purified the air. Those who returned home still tucked scented posies among their tunics to guard against miasma believed to spread plagues. In cottages, they burned wicks dipped in rosemary oil to keep hearthrooms fresh. As families drifted to sleep, they surrendered to dreams scented by incense and herbs. Though foul odors lingered at dawn once more, medieval folk found solace in the ancient arms of incense vinegar, posies, and pomanders, whom they trusted to defend them against the pestilent stench of a world not yet tamed by pipes and sewers. Before dawn, villagers gathered water from the spring to prepare herbal washes for hair. They carried moss soaked in clear water and handfuls of fresh herbs from cottage gardens. Rosemary and lavender stood highest among chosen plants. Women tied the herbs into small bundles and soaked them in wooden buckets of warm water near the hearth. As steam rose, the herbs released fragrant oils into the water. To shampoo, a woman dipped a cloth into the fragrant water and wrung it until only dampness remained. Kneeling by a wooden basin, she poured the liquid over her hair. Long tresses hung heavy with soot from evening fires. She pressed the damp cloth against scalp and temple, gently massaging in circular motions. With each press, hair loosened stubborn grime. A thin brush carved from soft tree bark aided in smoothing tangled locks. The brush removed clumps of ashes and dust as she worked from root to tip. After rinsing by pouring clear spring water from a clay jug, she tied hair loosely with a strip of linen. The herbal rinse left a light aroma that masked the musk of day labor. Neighbors watched as women exchanged tips on which herbs soothed itchy scalps. Mint leaves, boiled and mashed, served as a cool rinse during summer months. The mint water stung slightly, but relieved heat rash along hairlines. Trimming nails followed hair care. A small group gathered near a table in the courtyard. They used sharpened knives crafted by the village smith. Each person held a hand over a bowl filled with warm water and ash. The ash softened dirt under fingernails, making it easier to clean. A young apprentice scraped beneath each nail with a sliver of carved wood. He then pressed the knife edge against the fingertip nail and sliced along the edge to shorten length. The knife had been sharpened until smooth and free of rust. Women cautioned each other to cut only a narrow strip so nails did not weaken. After trimming, they scraped again beneath nails and washed hands in vinegar and water to disinfect tiny cuts. Each person patted hands dry with a clean linen cloth, scented with rosemary. Skincare required treating rashes caused by sunburn, insect bites, and chafing from woolen garments. A healer gathered plantain leaves and comfrey stems from a damp meadow near the river. She mashed the leaves into a pulp, using a flat stone on a wooden board. With careful hands, she formed thick poultices and applied them to reddened patches of skin on children. The children squirmed as the cool, wet paste touched tender arms, but soon settled as relief spread. Comfrey poultice eased swelling while plantain soothed itch. The healer bound each poultice with strips of linen, so it remained in place for hours. For severe rashes, villagers combined ash and honey into a coarse paste. The antiseptic ash, mixed with honey's natural sugars, formed an ointment applied to oozing sores. A thin layer of linen held the paste against the skin until it dried. After 2 hours, villagers returned and washed the region with warm water. They repeated treatment twice each day, until redness faded. When bees swarmed in summer, children learned to apply crushed nettle poultices to stings. The healer plucked nettle leaves wearing thick gloves and crushed them into a paste. She rubbed the paste onto the swollen bite. The slight sting of nettle soothed intense pain and reduced swelling within hours. For calloused feet, villagers soaked feet in shallow tubs filled with warm water and ground oats. The oats acted as a gentle scrub to remove dead skin. A neighbor then rubbed feet with a small piece of pumice stone found near the stream bed. Each rub smoothed rough patches. After drying feet, they massaged tallow infused with crushed flowers into heels. The tallow sealed moisture and prevented cracks during winter. As night fell, women sat by hearths and smeared herbal balm on rough palms and knuckles. They mixed beeswax with olive oil and a few drops of rose water. The balm softened calluses and protected skin from wind. Each person rubbed the warm salve between fingers and palms, pressing it into creases where dirt tended to gather. By the end of the day, villagers felt renewed. Their hair gleamed faintly of lavender and rosemary. Their nails stood clean and trimmed, free of dirt and infection. Skin bore the healing touch of comfrey and plantain. Though simple and often humble, these rituals of hair, nail, and skin care offered comfort and health in a world shaped by labor and nature alike. Before dawn, caregivers in the infirmary prepared for a day of tending the sick. The stone floors, once covered in straw, were swept clean as the first rays of light seeped through high windows. A shallow trench ran alongside the main ward, channeling water continuously from a nearby spring to wash away any spilled fluids. Caregivers filled wooden buckets with hot water, infused with vinegar and boiled herbs. They used rough linen cloths dipped in this solution to wipe down benches and simple beds after each patient's visit. Each wipe removed stains and eased foul odors lingering from fevers and wounds. In corner rooms, quivering patients lay on narrow beds covered with straw mattresses. Linen sheets were changed daily and laundered in the river under supervision of a priest who blessed each bundle to ward off evil spirits. Damp straw bedding was replaced with fresh straw disinfected by burning rosemary and rue between layers. As caregivers moved through the ward, they dipped their fingers into a pot of crushed mint leaves and applied the paste to their temples to fight off faint sense of sickness. They tied small pouches of dried lavender around their robes to repel fleas believed to spread disease. Across the courtyard stood the leper colony. A low palisade of wood separated it from the main infirmary. Inside, patients exhibited skin lesions and open sores. Caregivers tended to each lesion by first cleaning it with warm water and crushed marigold petals. The marigold's mild astringent properties helped draw out infection. After washing, they applied a paste of crushed yarrow and honey, believed to soothe inflamed skin. Each patient received fresh linen to wrap wounds, and the infected cloth was burned at midday to prevent contamination. During plague outbreaks, when fear gripped the countryside, a makeshift pest house appeared near the infirmary. A group of townsfolk constructed a simple wooden building with thatched roof to isolate the most contagious. Inside, the floor sloped toward a central drain leading to a cesspit. Caregivers wore coarse linen masks scented with cloves and myrrh. They refilled their masks with fresh herbs every few hours to mask stench from those suffering high fevers and buboes. Each caregiver washed hands in a basin of water mixed with ash and vinegar before entering and immediately afterward. Bread, broth, and mead arrived daily in sturdy clay pots delivered by an assistant who left them at the pest house door. Caregivers opened the door briefly to retrieve food, then closed it promptly. They wiped down door handles with a cloth soaked in vinegar to kill lingering bacteria. During the day, they sprinkled crushed salt and alum on floors to dry damp spots and discourage mold. Windows in the pest house remained open only at night when cool air helped reduce humidity. In daytime, shutters stayed closed to prevent curious villagers from peering inside. At dusk, caregivers extinguished lanterns and lit small braziers of burning juniper twigs. The warm smoke filled the pest house chamber and forced out stagnant air. Each stroke of smoke helped ward off pests that thrived on disease. Afterward, caregivers gathered at a small trough outside to wash their hands and faces. They poured leftover water into a trench that led away from the town to fields where rye would grow. They held a moment of silent prayer for the souls of those who perished that day. As night settled, the infirmary ward and pest house grew still. Caregivers checked each patient one last time, applying clean cloth to damp wounds and replacing water jugs. They left bowls of lavender tea on low tables to soothe throats scraped by fever. In the silent darkness, the faint aroma of vinegar and thyme drifted through corridors. Though fear of contagion remained, these measures of cleanliness and rudimentary quarantine offered a measure of hope that diligence could curb the spread of plague. Before dawn, parishioners washed their hands and faces in small basins at the church entrance. The parish priest stood by a stone font filled with holy water and sprinkled droplets onto each visitor's brow. This ritual reminded them that approaching the altar required both physical and spiritual cleanliness. No one dared enter the nave without first touching forehead, cheeks, and palm to the sacred water. A deacon intoned brief prayers about purification as worshippers dipped their fingers into the font, believing the water protected against sin and illness. During Sunday Mass, the priest cited biblical passages about Moses washing his hands before encountering God. He reminded listeners that washing symbolized readiness to receive sacrifice and grace. Before communion, altar servers carried vessels of water and wine to the sacristy. The priest washed his hands over a basin, reciting the psalmist's words, "I will wash my hands in innocence." His ablutions signaled to the congregation that holiness demanded both ritual and moral purity. Choir members then stepped forward to rinse faces under a small basin of water, preparing their voices to praise God. On feast days, entire villages gathered at the baptismal font for a collective washing rite. Priests led processions around the church 3 times, carrying banners of saints and thuribles of burning incense. At each circuit, worshippers paused to dip cloths into bowls of blessed water and wipe lips, eyes, and throat. This ceremony celebrated cleansing from original sin and the promise of renewal. Afterward, villagers exchanged small bottles of holy water to take home. They sprinkled thresholds, livestock stalls, and fields, believing these acts warded off disease, evil spirits, and miasma until the next communal washing. Imagine rising before dawn to stiff joints and stepping into a world drenched in grime. Dirt clings to clothing from fields and stables, and the nearest running water lies in a cold river a mile away. You carry clay jugs to the riverbank, lower woven buckets into icy currents, and haul water home in wooden pale-seach steps, soaking your feet and chilling your skin. Back in the cottage, you set that water over a fire, uneasy that the hearth smoke and soot remind you how quickly clothes and dishes grow fouled again. In the cramped kitchen, you sweep dirt and stray straw from the earth floor, careful to gather every crumb. A single piece of grain attracts flies within moments. You gather ash from last evening's fire to scrub soot from cooking pots. Ash and sand serve as rudimentary, scouring agents, gritty and harsh on hands, yet essential for preventing grease from stinking up the room. You wipe tables with vinegar and herbs, failing to erase all lingering smells of yesterday's salted pork. Outside, privies stand open to sky, and flies buzz around waste waiting to be covered. You don't linger near these pits, where a stray breeze of hot air sends nausea to your throat. Instead, you rely on straw mat near the door, dusted with crushed mint and pennyroyal to keep insects from crawling inside. You change chamber pots each morning, dumping contents into pits outside and snatching up chamber pots before mosquitoes find them. Each task demands constant vigilance against pests and disease. After hours of bending, scrubbing, and firing embers, you hang clothes on hedges to catch sun and wind, hoping they dry before dusk. Then you stomp through chores at the bakehouse, scrubbing flour from utensils and dumping waste into open drains that collect in shallow trenches. As night falls, you stoke small braziers of incense just to clear the air before you collapse onto straw bedding scented with lavender. In that moment, you know that medieval hygiene required strength and resourcefulness. You needed to turn ash into soap, herbs into repellent, and cold water into a means of survival. One more dawn would bring the same grime, the same chill, and the same fight to keep filth at bay. In that relentless cycle, you would find little rest, an existence that might break the spirit of anyone unaccustomed to medieval rigor.